Jerusalem, a city full of history and spirituality. It's a powerful place for travelers and people who go there for religious reasons, but for some, Jerusalem can be a little too much. It can trigger something called Jerusalem syndrome. This is a strange experience where visitors get overwhelmed by the city's religious energy. They start acting and thinking differently, often about religious things. Imagine suddenly feeling like you need to preach on the street like you're a prophet from the Bible, or imagine thinking you hear voices from God among the old buildings. It can happen to people of all religions, showing that anyone can be affected by Jerusalem's powerful mix of history, spirituality, and culture. It reminds us that sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between being really respectful and having unusual beliefs, especially in places that mean a lot to us. It's important to know that Jerusalem syndrome isn't a real mental illness. It's more like a group of temporary psychological things that happen when someone visits Jerusalem. Knowing this helps us understand it better and not think of it as a lifelong mental health problem. Jerusalem syndrome has been around for a long time, just like the city itself. For centuries, there have been stories of travelers to Jerusalem acting strangely religious. Old stories tell of pilgrims getting really emotional, thinking they saw miracles or heard messages from God. These stories show us that Jerusalem syndrome isn't new. It's probably been happening as long as people have traveled to Jerusalem. Doctors started writing about Jerusalem syndrome in the 1930s, thanks to Dr. Heinz Hermann, a psychiatrist in Israel. Dr. Hermann saw that some visitors to Jerusalem were acting similarly, so he started writing about it. His work helped us understand Jerusalem syndrome today and encourage more research into why it happens and how it shows itself. Let's look at some numbers to understand Jerusalem syndrome better. Around 100 cases are reported every year, but probably many more aren't. It can happen to people of any religion, not just Jewish or Christian people. Studies show that about 40% of people who get it already have a mental health condition, but 60% don't. This shows how powerful our minds can be, especially in a place like Jerusalem with so much history and spiritual meaning. Treatment for Jerusalem syndrome usually involves talking to a therapist and sometimes taking medicine. People usually get better quickly, especially after leaving Jerusalem. Getting help early is really important. Jerusalem syndrome is similar to other syndromes that happen in specific places, like Stendhal syndrome in Florence, Italy, and Paris syndrome in Paris, France. These syndromes happen when people have strong psychological reactions to the culture and history of these places. Jerusalem syndrome has even been on TV and in movies like The Simpsons. These shows often make the symptoms seem bigger than they are for laughs or drama, but they also help people learn about it. So Jerusalem syndrome is rare and interesting. It shows how much places with lots of history and culture can affect our minds. More research might help us understand why it happens and how to treat it better. This will help us understand the connection between our minds and the places we go.